There are fake clinics across Canada that regularly lie to people. Their goal is not providing real medical advice. It's not to support people at their most vulnerable, but rather it's to deceive them and to manipulate them into choosing not an abortion. These are crisis pregnancy centers, and today we are exploring the deceptions and the misinformation that you can find on those websites. I'm Teal. I'm the chair and co-founder of ARCC BC and the research coordinator for the BC Humanist Association, and I'm joined by Leslie.
I'm Leslie. I'm a registered nurse who's worked in women's health for 40 plus years and have been fighting the fight for women to have autonomy over their reproductive selves.
And part of that fight is fighting misinformation and also educating people about the harms of crisis pregnancy centers. First of all, what is a crisis pregnancy center, Leslie?
Well, a crisis pregnancy center is not a medical clinic in any way, shape, or form. They may have volunteer professional staff, but they're not working in that capacity in these clinics. So people think that they're going to a women's health clinic that is going to sit with them and give them the information that they're looking for about their options with an unplanned pregnancy. And they're not. They're going to get a lot of mis and disinformation about pregnancy termination that is actually really terrifying for people. And they're set up in such a way that it takes people a while to figure it out sometimes. And then by then it might be too late.
And we've often described these as fake clinics. Unlike a real clinic that's dedicated to providing up-to-date, accurate, and judgment-free information, these are organizations that are engaged in motivated counseling. Their goal is to dissuade people from having an abortion, and they often use very manipulative tactics. And this is hugely harmful. Leslie, what are we looking at today?
So today we are looking at Valley Care Pregnancy Center in Kentville, Nova Scotia.
Now, one of the first things we like to do when we're looking at these crisis pregnancy center websites is figure out where they are physically located. Here's beautiful Kentville in Nova Scotia, and you can see it's a small town, about 6,000 people. You're saying, Leslie, about?
That's what they said. Yeah, 6,000 plus people.
And so they have a real sexual health clinic called the Red Door, and this is a reproductive health clinic, but they also have the Valley Care Pregnancy Center. And when we look at the map, what we can see when we zoom in a little bit is here is the Valley Care Pregnancy Center, and just down the street, literally on the same block, you have the Red Door Clinic. And this is a tactic that crisis pregnancy centers have done time and time again, where they locate themselves in close proximity to real clinics, and the hope is that people will just go to the wrong clinic. They're like, oh, we're going to the health clinic on Webster Court or on Station Road, and right there they walk into the door and they've gone into the wrong building. We've also seen other deceptions where, for example, crisis pregnancy centers will have similar names and similar logos or acronyms to real clinics, and it's all a form of deception. Always be aware of that. That's one of the tricks that these organizations use. So this is the first page here. Leslie, what are some of the stuff that we see when we go through the homepage of this group?
Well, in this particular website, we see an awful lot of information, an awful lot of text, which is somewhat unusual. At first blush, it looks like they've done their homework. They cite sources. But then when you take the time to go and feed those sources into your own search bar, you find that either they're dead sources, they no longer exist, or they have actually cherry-picked information from the sites that they have cited as their sources.
When the BC Humanist and the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada did a review of crisis pregnancy center websites, we found there was a trend in them including less and less information on their websites and trying to drive people in the door. And the idea there was that they could provide misinformation in person. But as you were saying, this is a lot of information. Just on the homepage, you've got information about abortions. This looks like it's its own section, right? Like an information website, you've got a new phone number, a link. But if we scroll up, we'll notice that's the same phone number as who to call if you are thinking you're pregnant, or if you are considering parenting, or if you are considering adoption. It's the same phone number. Their goal is to get you in the door, but the amount of information on this website is a lot more than others. And as you were saying, there's some misinformation and dead links. But before we get into that, there's something else I always recommend people check on these things, and that is the disclaimer. When we go to the very bottom, we've got information about the organization, but right down here is a disclaimer that we see. And what's speaking to you here, Leslie?
They're not a medical center. They're a Christian charity, which isn't even in the same ballpark. And they don't provide resources for people looking to terminate a pregnancy. They don't provide referrals. They don't provide any of that information.
Crisis pregnancy centers will often masquerade as legitimate clinics, but they were literally set up as a wing of religious missions to try to dissuade people from having abortions. This one's open about its Christianity, which is nice. Some of them hide it quite well, but there's some other really interesting keywords that pop up when we look at this disclaimer. When we look through this disclaimer, we notice a lot of other red flags. Forced abortion jumps out as a term that you and I both, when we did our first review here, were kind of like, something's weird here. I'm also seeing sexual integrity. This is a new term for abstinence-only sex education that has been rebranding of abstinence-only. A lot of it is, of course, like purity culture, which has a lot of toxicity as well. They're not a medical clinic. They aren't as clear about that. And I don't necessarily see them being open about referring. Mostly places will provide disclaimers as to whether they refer for abortions or not. But this forced abortion is kind of interesting. That I've never seen that term on one of these websites. What does that speak to you, Leslie?
That's generally not a thing.
Let's see what happens when we go and look at abortion services. This one here jumps out to me, Leslie. This is a big quote from the Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic is, very legitimate source, generally speaking. And it says, having a medical abortion is a major decision with emotional and psychological consequences. If you're considering this procedure, make sure you understand what it entails, side effects, possible risks, complications, and alternatives. When we click on that, it does not go to the Mayo Clinic website. It goes to a PDF screen grab of the Mayo website from 2023. You were talking earlier about dead links and misinformation. We tried to find this website and we found the real Mayo Health Clinic website. It's up to date. Here's information about elective abortions. And we think this is the original link right here. We don't see the same language being used. And we can even go back and remember the language being used was major decision. So we're going to go back and we're going to go Control F, major. There's nothing. The word major comes up, not a single word. So they're using a 2-year-old PDF screen grab of the Mayo Health Clinic that has either been updated or doctored. We don't know. But either way, up-to-date, accurate information is so critical.
It absolutely is. And the thing is, it is medical scientific information, which changes so regularly and so fast that you don't refer to a 2023 document and expect people to take you seriously.
And critically, it's not even referring to the document. It's a PDF of the document, my friends. It is absolutely sketchy as all heck.
I mean, maybe this is legit. I mean, I can't say that it isn't, but it's a little emotionally loaded for the Mayo Clinic.
You could describe this for pretty much any medical procedure, right? Like you're about to get your leg amputated. It's going to be an emotional cycle. It'll have, it's basically one of those things where, like every medical procedure, you should go into it knowing what the side effects and possible risks are. That's what having accurate, up-to-date information is all about. So having people link to a PDF of that website is either sleight of hand or it's directing people to old information and just hoping they don't click on the link. The other thing to look at this website is surgical procedural abortions in Nova Scotia. When we click on that, we also get a dead site.
Yeah, so that's the dead site.
I appreciate keeping that website up to date is challenging, but if you're providing information on your website about people in potentially vulnerable situations, you have a duty to keep that information up to date. Scrolling down this page a little bit, we've got some more information about abortion. There's a lot more text on here as we're normally familiar with seeing. A section about ambivalence. You've seen the literature on this, Leslie. What's the main response that people have after they've experienced an abortion?
People are generally relieved. They've, made a very informed decision for themselves. For some people, it's a very difficult decision. For other people, it's less so. But through the other end of the process, they breathe a sigh of relief and move on. I'm not saying nobody goes to see their mental health practitioner a couple of times. Probably that's not a bad idea. People don't generally regret their decisions.
The idea of infantilizing people to say, like, you'll regret your decision. You can get a tattoo at 16, but you're going to regret your choice to have an abortion. It basically strips people of their agency and their ability to make decisions. It gets worse, though. Look at this. I was actually reading this while you were explaining that. We missed this on our first read-through. They say that ambivalence, mixed emotions about abortion, is an absolute contraindication for the abortion pill. It's in brackets. I don't know why. It suggests it's a quote. It's not. When we click on that hyperlink, it goes to information about dispensing mifgamizo. And when we look for the word ambivalence on this page, it does not come up. Once again, you're having hyperlinks that are adding to the illusion of authority and the illusion of having good information. And basically what they're saying here is if you have some mixed emotions, you should absolutely not choose an abortion because the procedure is permanent. Not only that, the language gets even more threatening, where you have life-threatening situations if you use the pill. And so basically they're using fear tactics to try to dissuade people from having an abortion if they have any mixed feelings whatsoever. But look, there's more, Leslie. Right below here is that same Mayo Health Clinic quote again. I'm beginning to think that the reason why the Mayo Health Clinic may have updated their website is because this quote was being taken out of context by every crisis pregnancy center in the bloody continent.
It wasn't their best work. So
I think we can agree on that. Absolutely. There was one other one here which I thought jumped out to us, which is when we click on the World Health Organization, we just get their generic World Health Organization website. So, like, quite literally, it's like saying the United Nations says, and then just having a link that goes to UN.org.
hold on. Negative emotional complications of abortion from NAF. So that's going to be a legitimate site.
Let's find out if it is. Hold on. What is NAF, by the way? That's the National Association.
That's National Abortion Federation. They're a legitimate organization.
So we've got recommendations for pre-abortion care. This is just another PDF.
This is taken completely out of context. That's what this is.
Actually, no, but it undermines their point. Although the predominant emotional response to induced abortion is relief for the vast majority of women, they mention some other options. So this is a PDF screen grab once again. So you can't stop. This is not going anywhere. For folks, I'm trying to click here. This is literally just a PDF screen grab. And this is a link where these folks are trying to they've quoted here. They've got their main quote here. Yeah. So basically, once again, their practice is to screen grab PDFs and then link to those rather than linking to the real NAF site. I suspect the reason they want to do that is because NAF will have legitimate and open information on their website. And once you're on the NAF website, you're not going to go back to this absolute travesty of a website because all the accurate information is on NAF.
The other thing about that NAF link was those were pre-existing situations for people. So they were risk factors for negative sequelae. So if you were a mental health therapist, not somebody posing as a mental health therapist, and this was one of your clients, and they had some of these situations that they're discussing there under risk factors, you would want to address these issues with them. None of these are contraindications. They're simply situations that you want to talk to your client about before they go ahead and make this decision. This information is for somebody who has an existing relationship with a client, or a client comes in and they say, listen, I've got this unplanned pregnancy. I've got this trauma history. I'm wondering if you can give me some coping strategies because it's an invasive procedure. It's a surgical procedure. People coming in for a pap test who have a trauma history. You approach things very differently than you do for somebody who doesn't.
Yeah,
like absolutely. This is all, you know what this is? This is client-centered care.
I always find the language they use re-stigmatizes things. Like you've got the belief that abortion is the same act as killing a newborn infant. Even repeating that to me is reinforcing this negative trope. This is one of the most frustrating websites we've seen actually because there's so much information on it. We could talk about this for days. Like, look, there's a rap video, Leslie. I'm sorry. This is the first time I've ever seen. We're not showing this, friends.
History of the abortion of his child. Well, I'm just going to say that is a very inflammatory statement that does not make any sense.
But look, we've got other things. Faith plays a huge role in the outcome of a crisis. So we've got them pivoting towards religion. There's a sermon down here. They're talking about God, your conviction in God. A lot of times these organizations will try to hide their religiosity. In this case, they aren't doing that. But also, of course, that religiosity can play into any sense of guilt that someone feels. So basically, you can see what they're cramming into this website is a ton of information. And one of the reasons they'll do that is to increase their search engine optimization. So when someone is experiencing an unplanned pregnancy in Kentville in Nova Scotia, they're going to search, like, I'm pregnant, what do I do? And the top links are the ones they're most likely to click. And so a website like this with tons of information just crammed into it and lots of hyperlinks is going to bump it up in the SEO. And that's going to mean that they're more likely to get clicked on and they're going to drive people to their website and to their clinic as opposed to the real clinic, the red door just around the corner. The other thing I think it's worth noting here is the options, right? So you've got information about the abortion pill. This information is, again, they've got that Mayo Clinic quote at the top. Leslie, it's driving me nuts. It's just they're a one-trick pony on this one. Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. We've got information about MIFI. The ambivalence content is there again. Basically, they're treating the abortion pill or mifepristone, mifepristone as the same information as an abortion, as other types of abortion, that is. The other aspect here is parenting. And the idea is to scare people away from abortion and make parenting more attractive. And one of the things they do for that is these earn while you learn programs. And these are encouraging people to take like prenatal classes and parenting classes, and they can earn credits, which they can then spend in the store that's run by these crisis pregnancy centers. They provide maternity clothing, and they also provide diapers and formula. They have baby clothes up to 2 years and support groups. That would be fine if it was a community group that was supporting someone who chose to have a child. But in this case, they're presenting this information to counteract the economic arguments that sometimes people will present, which is basically, I can't afford a child right now. And their argument is, no, of course you can afford a child. We'll provide you with children's clothing for up to 2 years. Of course, that child needs to be clothed for the next, 16 years of their life, but those first 2 years are covered. Congratulations, we've dealt with the economic drivers of potential abortion.
That is also a service that most women's drop-in centers will have. And they do provide legitimate resources for people who opt to continue pregnancies and look for parenting help and mothers groups and stuff like that, which is a really valuable service, but it's not judgmental and loaded.
And that's the problem with these groups, right? This is crisis pregnancy centers are engaged in motivated counseling. Their goal is not to provide people with up-to-date, accurate, and judgment-free information. It's to dissuade people from having an abortion, whether it's through misinformation, through fear, or simply providing people with baby clothes. The last thing I want to click on here is their About Us page. And when we click on About, the one that jumps out to me here is their statement of faith. So this group isn't trying to hide their religiosity. A lot of crisis pregnancy centers will be tiny fine print, or you can only find out based on their parent organization. And that tells us a lot about the kind of people who might be welcome in their space. They're not necessarily going to be open and welcome to LGBTQ plus people or people of other faith traditions. So we're going to do one last click here, friends, and thank you so much for following along with us. This is the abortion pill information on their website. Walk me through what we see here.
So one of the things that they're doing is they're talking about who is not a candidate for this particular medication.
Here's a list. Look at this list right here.
Considerations.
Yeah.
Right. These are not over-the-counter pills. You don't go into a drugstore or a dollar store and buy them over the counter like a Tylenol or an Advil. Somebody, a medical professional, is prescribing these medications. And so like every other medication, whether it's for your blood pressure or whether it's for birth control or whether it's to terminate a pregnancy, there is a risk-benefit analysis done by the provider who is writing the prescription because they do no harm. They provide a safe, inclusive service. So this is nonsense. People don't need to do their pre-work to determine whether or not their healthcare provider should be providing this for them. You take your healthcare need to your provider, and then in collaboration, you come up with the best plan for you.
You may be considering medical abortion as an option for your unplanned pregnancy. The Valley Care Pregnancy Center offers information on abortion and decision-making tools and support to help you make an informed health decision. An unplanned pregnancy can be a difficult experience. We're here for you. A real clinic would say something like, talk to your health professional about the options. And this might be an option for you, but they aren't saying when it's an option for you. They're only saying the list of things when it's not an option for you. There's so much information on this website that is presented in a way that's unreliable that the worry is that they're just trying to scare you away from the process. Like, if you may have adrenal failure, don't try mifepristone. Yeah, that's what your doctor is going to tell you when you go talk to them. This is just another example of the misinformation and lies that we see on crisis pregnancy center websites. And this is a particularly bad one. Thank you for joining us this time around. We're going to dive into a lot more websites. There's almost 160 of these crisis pregnancy centers across the country. There's probably one in your town, and they may even be getting funding from your local government, or they may be cooperating with local health authorities. And one of the goals that the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada has been working on is trying to make people more aware of the many harms that crisis pregnancy centers have. So thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for chatting, Leslie.
Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you.